opportunities that take place that all students can access, but then we also have a limited number of activities that are really for identified students as well. We employ a compacting model in our math program to, I think, really just try to identify students and provide them just enrichment activities within that type of program. That starts in grade 1 for compacting. In our middle school, it's a bit different. Our middle school really is more of a school-wide enrichment model. There are lots of enrichment activities that all students can access. We do formally identify students at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, but it is the type of thing that if a parent were to call and say my child's not being challenged enough, you know, we have something that we can say, well, maybe they should try this, and if that works for them, then we can consider formal identification at another point if they didn't quite find themselves eligible during that process as well. It is something, again, that when I serve on some panels like this, I feel underqualified to actually provide feedback on these things. But I can tell you in some of my former roles that as a new administrator, when I first became an administrator, I was put in charge of a district-wide Gift and Talent program. And it's a really challenging role for a new administrator to be placed into, especially depending on the community that you're actually providing services in. So I think I can give a lot of guidance in terms of like what not to do sometimes and what to do sometimes. So you know, it's an interesting perspective to have on that. So that's where I come from. That's who I am.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Can you pick me up from here? I gotta move it all the way over here.
There you go.
All right. So I am Rebecca McClellan Crawley. I have served on both light and dark sides. As a teacher for 15 years, doing resource, in-class support, biology, AP environmental, you name it. I was teaching all those different things, and then I said, you know where I can make the most difference? In administration. Mostly because I had a child, and I thought that this imaginary world would then open up all of these other things. So when we would notice the image that was put up during the keynote, and there was a rebellious Rebecca, I identify. So perhaps administration was not my best choice, because how many of you are current administrators? Okay, how many of you have been an administrator for more than 2 years? Well, good for you, good. So I have been a classroom teacher, been an instructional coach, was an administrator for 2 years, going into a district where it would appear, surface level, really wanted some really exciting science to take place. So when we talk about when students fear that ambiguity and that change, also sometimes teachers who are gifted themselves and parents who are gifted themselves know a system and how it works and don't want to change. So much like my colleague here said, we could probably tell you many ways to not do things as an early administrator. Because when we don't take the time to really sit back and do a strong program evaluation to find out what's working, what is not necessarily working at optimum levels, what do the kids want us to do, what do the parents want us to, like taking into consideration all of the stakeholders, it's not going to work, right? And probably next to music, that gifted one, it gets chipped right off. Right? We'll add the gifted administrator title to your job responsibilities, and it can be taken away very quickly. So I would caution whatever decisions you're looking at doing, really get input from everyone, including the ones who are very loud and maybe not so nice to speak with, because it's going to give you a really good perspective. Our system right now in West Windsor is all based off of Renzulli. We do some great work with sending our teachers up to Confortude. We have whole teams that go up. It has been amazing to be in a district where they fully support talent development and cast a really wide net, right? So aside from previous experience of you take the test on Monday, maybe it's a test that is not even in your native tongue, then you perform whatever score on it, and then we decide, well, you're gifted or not. This is very open, and it is so so open to all kids. Now, it's not perfect, right? And we have recognized that ourselves, and we are always trying to catch all the little fishes, right? We're trying to catch them all. But we are spending a lot of time pushing in and leading, not only as teachers of gifted students, but also as coaches for the rest of the staff, so that we can increase the capabilities of everyone, right? We want to have increased capacity in all of our buildings, so that the teachers know you do have these children sitting in your classroom, and oftentimes they will get bored. So when a pencil goes flying at you, it's not necessarily a discipline problem. It might just be a student who is not getting their needs met. So there's been a lot of the work that we've done of finding what works and always improving it in West Windsor.
Thank you. Karen?
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Machuca. I'm the principal in the Orange School District in Essex County. The school that I oversee is Scholars Academy. And so within Scholars Academy, we have a program for our GT program. It's for the district. I oversee grades 1 through 5. I used to do grades 1 through 8, but our 6th, 7th, 8th graders now filter into the STEM high school, which is newly opened about 3 years. So it's kind of like our feeder program. So one of the neat things about our program is that we have 7 elementary schools in the district, and 1 day a week the students are bused to our school, and they have a whole day of GT programming, which includes science, math, and STEM. And they rotate through those 3 classrooms. So in the past, we've had it where the kids were in a core classroom. So if they were really passionate or gifted in science, they were in science class for 3 hours. And they went really deep in their curriculum. Over the years, we've had to change a few things due to budgeting, due to enrollment and things like that. So this year's model for the past 2-3 years has been that the students have all those areas, STEM, math, and science. So like I said, it starts in grades 1 through 5. So on Mondays, we have all the 5th graders throughout the district get bused, and they come to me. They get there around 9 o'clock, and the staff stay with them from 9 o'clock until 2:15. That includes eating lunch with them. And then, and the mandatory recess for 20 minutes. And then Tuesday we have 4th grade, Wednesday is 3rd grade, and Thursday is 1st and 2nd graders. Okay, so that's what we end up doing. We use the Naglieri test. Our biggest focus in the past couple of years, especially this year, is looking at our L students, our English language learners, and my personal mission is our TWACE exceptional students. And so I'm really excited that we finally are starting to start that conversation of the students that are in self-contained classrooms are starting to be identified and coming to us, and we're getting their IEPs and how are we helping them as they're coming into the program. So I think that's basically the model that we're following. So, and I've been in the district. This is my 15th year in the district, and I'm happy to say my team is here today. So we do make sure that we come here. We go to NJAGC's conference also in March too. That's part of our district's PD, and they do fund all of that very, very well.
So you're introducing yourself, your role, and your model.
Hi, I'm Cindy Assini. I'm from Hillsborough. I am the K-12 supervisor of social studies and gifted and talented. So we supported a number of teachers who went through the Rutgers program. We actually did a cohort in the district where teachers could go through the program and the classes were on site. That was back right before I took this position 6 years ago. So it's been great to have teachers that have really gone through gifted education coursework in the district, both teaching specifically in our gifted and talented program, but also teaching in a gen ed elementary classroom, for example. So our program looks different at different grade bands. In K2, we're doing enrichment support and flexible grouping, which is the model that we're slowly moving towards. In grades 3 and 4, we formally identify students for a pull-out program that is heavy on independent research and creative expression. Then in grades 5 to 8, we do replacement social studies. I don't necessarily recommend that, although I will say that with the revision of the social studies standards for the state, in case you haven't heard, has come and publicly said to folks like social studies supervisors that the revised standards will be very heavily influenced by the C3 framework, which is all about research. So I do think that there's a strong connection there between meeting the needs of gifted kids and teaching the skills embedded in the C3 framework. So that's our middle school program. And then in our high school, we have an internship program where students do we have an independent study program, but in addition to the independent study program, we have a community service program where students work with a teacher and a community partner and develop a capstone project that they collaborate on with the teacher and community partner. As far as other options, one of our stellar extracurricular offerings at the intermediate level is National History Day. So I'm trying to roll that out in other grades. It's certainly a labor of love for the teachers that have developed it. They were teachers who went through the gifted program, certificate program here, and then wrote about, for one of their papers, developing this program in the district and actually did it. So that would be part of our programming that I'm really proud of.
So I neglected to ask you, just would you say how large your district is?
Oh, sure. Hillsborough is a suburban district with about 7,700 students.
7,700. Okay.
Warren Township has about 1,600 students right now.
Because you said because you said K-8.
We're K-12 and we're regional, and we are both Middlesex and Mercer County, and we have 10,000 students plus.
Pre-K through 12, I'm going to say about 3,000 in Essex County.
So you can see the scope and the range of urban, suburban, rural, and size. Okay. I was just thinking about Sylvia Rim's keynote, and then Joyce did a thing on program evaluation. So my question is, I guess I should go forward, not down.
If you just take a step backwards. Thank you. No, you're good.
Is there a ledge back here?
No.
Given the changing nature of our information, global society, internationalism, should gifted programs be focusing, and what she said this morning about underachievement, and should gifted programs be focusing more on creativity, problem solving, acquisition of knowledge, content knowledge, social emotional, or some other variable? Because we can't be all things to all kids, so like where should our emphasis be? Go ahead.
I actually asked my students for their responses to all of your questions. So, mainly because I don't think that we hear their voice enough in all aspects. So I created a little Padlet. I will share it with you later if you want. I have little video recordings too about what they thought gifted education needs, and it's dependent on your district.
Right.
So if you have courses that are infusing creativity and you can walk through all of your classrooms and you know that these things are going on a daily basis and not just because it's a team building day, then your gifted programming may not necessarily need that as the focus. You have to really do the research within your own district to see what's already being met by our current curriculum. What are our teachers trained in? Are they able to facilitate a problem-based classroom, which will give kids exposure to solving real-world problems, which is, I don't know if you know this, but our kids can see through all the BS, right? Just like we can see through all that stuff that could have been said in an email but was a 45-minute faculty meeting, the kids can see through that too. So they want authentic practices, and that's what our kids are craving to make a difference in the world, right? They see adults as really terrible role models most of the time. I hear this, they come in for lunch bunch and they're like, oh, did you see how the world is burning today? So, I kid you not. So they'll come in and they'll say, like, what could we tackle? What can we do to change the problem with the bees in Plainsboro? Or what can we do to change how we're not learning social emotional strategies because adults are just saying, well, when I was your age, I had to walk uphill both ways to school and you should just deal with it. And I love giving the start things. But so this kind of journey for me of like understanding where our gifted kids are really struggling with the SEL piece was that, yeah, we can give them lots of acceleration and we're really good at saying, let's take this test and let's give you some extra coursework and let's sit you down and we can do some independent research and we can do a lot of curriculum compacting, but we forget that at the end of the day, we're not teaching programs, we're teaching kids. And so for me, it's always Maslow before Bloom, that our kids are lacking the skills because mostly we were never trained in those skills. So we feel very inadequate, right, as the word for how to teach kids self-regulation, how to teach them their own advocacy skills, how to teach them it's not wrong to want to be proud of what skills you possess and to tell the world that this is what you want to do with it. But we kind of think that that's like secondary to all things without realizing that we're teaching the whole child.
Okay.
And so that's what my students always advocate for is, as gifted individuals, please spend more time developing their competencies in the social emotional realm.
Okay. Karen?
For our program, we've been focusing on the 4 C's of 21st century learning.
Okay.
So that has been our focus, and it's in every classroom, and the students are mindful of, they have to be collaborative, they have to be able to communicate with each other, because that seems to be one of our biggest issues too, is because when they're at their home school, and they're like the rock star in their class, but when they come to us, they have other rock stars. And so they don't understand why you're not following my idea, because in my home school, you all follow my ideas. So that is that collaborative part, and so we deal with a lot of social emotional, like she said, and so we were doing parent workshops on that and helping parents understand that, and trying to help parents understand just because they're 8 years old and they're talking like they're 16, they're still gonna have an 8-year-old meltdown. So it's that parent component too, and just trying to educate everybody. But those 4 C's are our backbone right now, and it's part of our progress report also for the students, so they get that feedback.
Bill?
Yeah, I agree with what everybody's saying. I think the social emotional part is something that is it's pervasive through the whole community right now.
Right.
I think
Right.
the stress that kids, whether they're identified as gifted or not identified as gifted, is something that is very real. We were just having a conversation, two of my teachers are here today, and we were having a really good conversation about a student that, again, the teacher is misunderstanding maybe what is motivating and driving the student at that point, but the relationship, I think, with the gifted and talented teacher is kind of the one that can help navigate that situation. And if these students really are truly gifted and have unique needs, I mean, that relationship with that teacher is over time. They're with that teacher for multiple years. That teacher knows them well, kind of knows what makes them tick, can actually help them, I think, navigate some very challenging situations that really are why they're identified that way. So it is something, though, that goes well beyond just gifted education, though. I mean, I think that discussion around social emotional learning throughout the whole school community is something that we're focusing on right now. So it's a part of that program as well.
Thank you. Cindy?
Just to add a little bit to what's been said already, which I certainly agree with, I think independent research helps build a lot of those real-world skills, and when we have students do independent research, it's with the twist of how is it going to make a difference. So that's been, I think, effective in helping them really invest in the process, and then open up the door to work on things like executive functioning and self-regulation, because the research process is messy, and the likelihood that children will reach a level of frustration is high. It also builds just communication skills, especially at the elementary level. We have students do a lot of interviews of experts, which is a great way to build those communication skills. So we've had a really, I think, great experience implementing independent research as a vehicle to develop all of those skills.
It's interesting, though, one of the things that's inherent in your comments is that you're building on, you know, your school system, and you're building within the infrastructure that's in place, because you mentioned it's a priority across the district, and then with a particular focus on these kids. But social emotional is I know it's a huge initiative in New York, and a lot of articles around mental health and social emotional concerns. So it's interesting if that's something that you feel, that's an aspect of your program that you think needs to be front and center. You may want to talk after, but just to think about ways to incorporate that where teachers don't feel like it's an additive. I mean, we talked about relationships as a way to get there. You talked about independent studies as a vehicle. So whatever that vehicle is to get that piece in. So thinking about programming, I get calls all the time. What do we use for identification? What's the magic bullet? And there's different, if you were in Joyce's program evaluation, there's different components to programming. Identification is one component. Service delivery, what kind of model you're doing, cluster grouping, enrichment, whole class, is another component. Teacher training, and several of them mentioned the Records Gifted Certificate Program, as well as overall PD teacher training. Parent involvement, critical component to program success, and program evaluation. So which component of gifted program do you think has the most leverage in advancing and sustaining a program toward best practice? You had mentioned, it's one of the first things on the chopping block. So if we had to put money or resources or something behind a certain area, not to say, they're all critically important, but which area has the most leverage to sustain program excellence?
Okay, so if you are an administrator or an educator in a district where you have very vocal parents, I would like to go back and step back that, we would never lose gifted and talented
Mm.
in West Windsor, Plainsboro. Okay, it's an annual just write a check campaign. I have kids who will come in and are paying for their fees for National History Day. They pay to be a part of future problem solving. When I taught in Perth Amboy, where 97% of my students were on free and reduced lunch, I couldn't even get a bus to take them out when they won first place in the state for Odyssey of the Mind. Okay, and had 0 parents show up because they couldn't, because they were working. So when we talk about the disparities, right, think about where you are working. If you're gonna have parents that are gonna show up, then get them to show up. Right, so offering those things out to the community, but for us in West Windsor, it's really been about supporting the teachers.
Okay.
Right, building that capacity within the district, because then you see it play out with all the students. So those social emotional needs are being addressed by the teachers. There's only 6 of us on the team, K-8, with 10,000 students. You know, we're spread a bit thin. But at the same time, if we're able to teach other teachers how to recognize, how to meet the needs of the students that are in their classrooms on an everyday basis, that is money really well spent. We can teach them about compacting, we can support them, we can find them resources, we can work with them to help address needs at home as well.
So
Teacher,
training,
building
yeah.
teacher efficacy,
Yeah,
so
teacher
important.
capacity.
Yeah.
I think for us, because of the population of students that I have, we can just use the data from every article that you see. You're looking at students of diverse backgrounds. Majority of the district is African American and Hispanic. We have a school called Newcomers, where the students that are coming here from Port of Entry, that's where they go for several weeks. So they're not just put into a gen ed classroom and like, here you go with an ESL teacher for 45 minutes. They are there in that school from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, again, bus there to support their learning. So you really have to look at your demographics. So our parents, some parents are able to provide, some aren't, but the district knows that and is able to put the funding in. So you just have to show the data and resources. Every article talks about the underrepresentation. We are nothing but that representation. That is the whole program, is all of our students that you see. So if you follow Orange School District on Twitter, you will be able to see all of those great things and just see the different programmings and our diverse background, which is really neat.
Teacher training, okay.
Yeah, I would agree, and I don't think it's just,
It's not one or the other.
it's not one or
right,
the other, and
right.
I do believe that the
Yeah.
idea of teacher training goes well beyond gifted ed,
Right,
because
of course.
there's that issue of, in our community, if you're not identified, then you've missed the cut by, you know, whatever item it was
Yeah.
on the matrix that we're using at that point. There's still a need there, and it still has to be addressed, and that's where workshop models and strategies for differentiation and having discussions with teachers just about how do they do that within their classroom, and then really upping the game, I think, in terms of what we really expect in terms of a shared responsibility for these children comes into play, and that's a big focus that's ongoing, I think, across the district.
All right, so if you think teacher training, teacher efficacy, teacher capacity is the lever that will then maintain program success and then build program best practice, what are the 3 qualities that teachers of the gifted should possess? I mean, you talked about relationships, but I was thinking earlier Sylvia's presentation, and she, talked about the creative gifted. What are the 3 qualities that teachers working with these kids should possess? And that's not to say, I mean, you could argue, should teachers of the gifted be gifted themselves, but what are the 3 qualities that teachers should possess in working with these kids? We'll start with you and come on down.
So I do like Renzuli's model of gifted behavior.
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful to have gifted teachers who engage in some gifted behavior in terms of having some passions and pursuing them. So for me, I'm very fortunate to work with teachers who are all extremely passionate, both about things in their lives, but also about their teaching of gifted students. So I'd say passion is one. I have seen extreme flexibility with our gifted teachers. We had our staff cut significantly due to budget issues in our district. So I was like, you don't want me to come and talk today because I'm not doing a good job with gifted programming. I'm just so sad to see us have less staff to try to do the very same services. But they've really been creative in how they've approached that. And I can think about specific students where teachers have gone above and beyond in terms of, creating a behavior plan and offering supports and incentives like meeting with a mentor to really get gifted kids to buy into what's going on even outside of the gifted classroom, back in their gen ed classroom. So flexibility, I think, is really important. And we talked a lot about relationships and social emotional learning, and to me, the characteristic that relates most to that is empathy. So regardless of whether teachers had a similar experience, any of the children in their care, being able to empathize with those experiences and those children is just incredibly important.
Thank you.
I agree. I mean, I thought about this. I think flexibility is a huge part of this. We also are going through some cuts because of declining enrollment, and I think we've had to kind of reorganize our program somewhat, and I think that the teachers that are a part of that program have done a phenomenal job of just, again, keeping front and center what's really important, and figuring out a way to kind of deliver those services in a way that doesn't, I think, compromise the experience for the students. I think passion and creativity is also really important. We try not to box them in terms of like what they're supposed to do with students. They need to know their students, and then have some flexibility in terms of how they can organize what's going to be of interest for those students, and how to kind of again make them feel successful as learners, and I think really feel that they're getting something out of the experience with the teachers. So I think flexibility, creativity, and passion is really, really, really important. Yeah.
Interesting. Some overlap.
Like when you do these activities with your students, and then you tell them, all right, but you can't repeat a single word that anybody else said. So I have my list, and I'm checking them off.
Check off.
All right, now I will add
creativity.
another buzzword. This is a tweetable moment. If you get me on a good angle. All right, so I definitely think on a regular basis, I do go in. You can tell I'm quirky because this is as good as it gets at 45. I tell that to the kids all the time. I'm like, so I'm you. This is as good as it gets, and they're like, oh. And then they'll go, yes, like, you're pretty cool. I'm like, yes. I've got street credit with 11-year-olds, right? So good. I tell them, like, just embrace the weird, right? Own who you are. So I think for our teachers, for them to be able to identify that you don't all have to be little cookie cutters of each other, right? So teachers that are just advocates for GT, that can teach their children how to be advocates for their GT selves is so important. And that doesn't happen by accident, right? We've got to provide them with the professional development on what are all these characteristics, and then how do we best support those characteristics, and how do we create programs for that. The flexibility is huge, right? Because you're not gifted in all areas. So to say, well, we're going to offer a program at 7 a.m. that's going to teach you a foreign language may not necessarily be the best option for it, and to do it as a compliance checkbox, that's not what's going to meet the needs of the kids. So you've got to have as many flexible thinkers in there that are going to say, we're going to teach kids, not a program. And if that program doesn't necessarily provide us with a vehicle to get us to where we want our kids to go, you have to have some rabble rousers in there, right? You've got to be able to say, this isn't working for our kids. So a characteristic that I think would be necessary in that role is you've got to be that rabble rouser.
Yeah, you got to go rogue.
You've got to say, like, this isn't working for my kids. I'm going to close the door, and I'm going to talk to my kids about what's going to work best for them in that day. And I'm going to make decisions on the fly that are appropriate for the kids that are sitting with us right now. And they've got to be able to take those risks.
For me, repeating a little bit of it, but the creativity part is huge for me. The staff do not have a set curriculum. They come to me at the end of the year and say, this is what I want to do for next year, because one of our rules is you cannot do what the homeschool is doing.
Right.
If we find out Project Lead the Way, we were going to do that, found out one school was doing it, we had to throw it away. We can't do it then, because then there's no reason for them to come to us. And I'll always ask the students, why are you here? If you're playing with, one of my teachers was able to get Hot Wheels curriculum. So now if my administrator walked in and said, really, I pull the kids out every day for them to play with Hot Wheels, that may not be good. But we had to talk about why and the curriculum behind that. So the creativity is huge. For me, that growth mindset for the staff members is essential. I can say that the staff that I work with, they always come to me with something new. Right now, our biggest thing is using Microsoft Education, and the amount of experts that we have on the screen talking to students is just mind-blowing. And so I learn something new every day, so I know the kids are, and they're just and all over. So it's not even thinking outside the box, it's thinking outside of, like, to the other side of the world, because it's not just in box thinking anymore, not even close to. We're talking to people in California and India, all over the place that you can, wetlands, and it's just been phenomenal. So I think being able to look beyond and not be like, oh, it's 3 o'clock, my day is over.
Right.
GT teachers just have that, they just do that extra, and you just can't really pinpoint what that magic word is, they just kind of do it. It's that passion within.
All right, so I want to open it up to you. I had asked, some questions about their model and levers for change, but what's burning? What are issues on your mind? What do you want to know? I know it's late in the day and the sugar has gone down. It's nap time. I get it. Questions? Yeah.
Could you talk more about use of Microsoft Education and connecting kids to experts? Could you talk more about that?
I may have to defer to my teacher who's sitting right in front of me for that. Some of this. I learned from them a lot. So the program, right? Microsoft Education. I want to make sure I was saying it right. She'll be like, you said that wrong. So what you do, you go through Microsoft Education and you are able to set up virtual field trips with experts. We just had one last week with a woman, a ranger in Southern California, and she was able to literally do a virtual field trip with the kids. She had the PowerPoint ready, she had the background of the beach. Now we're freezing here at the time, so she had that. Another one, we met with somebody in North Carolina at the aquarium, and she had an actual alligator she brought up to the camera, and she had everything planned. So these are actually, it's like having another teacher in the classroom, but the teacher is able to, I give my staff credit because they have questions in advance, so that when the presenter says, like right now, does anybody have any questions, and there's crickets, the kids already had the questions.
Right.
But the staff go around and look at the questions first to make sure it's not like, how old are you? What's your favorite color? It pertains to that content. So when they come back, it's just phenomenal, because sometimes their homeschools don't have time to do that because they have to follow the curriculum and they have their benchmarks assessments. We have that very great flexibility. But Microsoft Education, if you just go Google into that, you will take one of the courses, if you will, and you get little badges to add at the end of your emails, and then it opens up more and more things. She just recently got a
Do
new
you have
badge.
to subscribe?
You have to take a training course
Okay.
through Microsoft Education, and then they give you the badge, and you have access to all of their virtual field trips, experts. You can Skype classrooms around the country on different topics. You can collaborate.
Did you hear that?
Is the course like the Google certification? Is it very
It's
expensive?
it's free. It's
Oh yes, free is our word, by the way.
it's 12 slides, and then you take a quiz.
Oh, it's an online.
Yes.
It's online, like an online module.
It's all like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you'll be able to go into it, yes.
So is it a bit like Google Expedition?
The Google Expeditions, you have the headset, right? Because we have those, and so this is a Skype call.
Okay.
Or Zoom. Yeah. Other questions? Oh, you go ahead.
I was just going to add, because we've had a district goal for the last couple of years in all of our classes to have expert connections outside of the district. So we have a map of all the places in the world that our classrooms have connected with. If anyone, I think I can add people to see it if anyone's interested, and some other sources that we've used. So one sounds like the National Park Service. Some social studies. I know we've used Plymouth Plantation, for example. Students have spoken with different historical reenactors that work at Plymouth Plantation. And we also subscribe to NEPRIS, which is a great source
Can you spell that, or
NEPRIS, which is a great source for expert connections for teachers and students.
And again, do you have to take a class, or you just
That's
Google?
paid.
NEPRIS, I know we
NEPRIS is
pay
paid.
for.
You pay for it.
Right.
Okay.
I wanted to second NEPRIS.
Okay.
If you are working in STEM and you don't necessarily have access to parents
Yeah.
or local people that could come in and talk about because every kid's going to come in and say, well, I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to be an engineer. And then you're like, well, what kind of an engineer? I don't know, the engineering kind. So that allows them to develop those questions and talk with people, say, I am in this class for engineering and this is the design that I'm making for the building, and I want to hear what your thoughts would be, to get critical feedback from people in the industry. It allows them that opportunity. A lot of people that are involved heavily in the maker education movement have really taken hold of NEPRIS as a great resource for people.
So there's resources available to you to expand the learning that goes on in the classroom and on the district that seems to be cost effective, either free or nominal, that really can take these kids into areas of expertise that they so desperately need. Yeah.
I had a question about the one day that they're in. What did you call on me?
Yeah, there's two. Yeah, I'm going to do you, and then I'm going for okay. That's good. Yeah, you too. So now I'll go back. Yeah.
When they go to you for the full day,
Mm-hmm.
what happens with the classroom work? We have like a 1 hour pull-out program, and the teachers have
The
such a hard
pushback.
time
Yep.
with that. It's such a stressor.
So when they go back, do they have to make it, or they penalize? Yeah.
They are not supposed to make up the classwork. They are given the homework to do.
Okay.
But we do work with the teachers. This has been a long time. You know, when the
Yeah.
program first rolled out, it was a little different. But this has been a long time of developing relationships with all the schools and all the teachers.
Okay.
All of the staff know in the district that I look at all the kids' report cards. So if there's a problem, that the teachers will call me and say, oh, I'm noticing his grades are starting to go down. But without that relationship, it looks like we're in Mickey Mouse land and everything is wonderful.
Right, la, la, la.
So, and the kids don't have to do this. But when they go back, they're supposed to get the homework. They're technically not supposed to give an assessment on that day. But again, we've been working really well with the other staff members in the district. We're not really running into that problem. The other thing is, they know when the kids are leaving their classroom. So maybe today I'm not going to give the test because I know 4 of them are going to be out. So the original model was that when your gifted and talented kids are leaving your classroom, that's your day to go through, reteach, because those kids don't need reteaching time.
Yeah.
That's the time that you can spend with that group of students at their home school, and meanwhile the GT kids are over here. But you know, sometimes you don't have that luxury because curriculum we have to keep moving and moving.
Right.
But it's been pretty solid. But I think looking at kids' grades, that communication with the teachers and the administrators in the district. So it's like I work with 7 other schools and really staying on top of that.
And it's incremental. I mean, you start with the 1 hour and, but forming those relationships. But yeah, absolutely. There's gonna be an initial pushback. Okay.
I was wondering if you've ever had to deal with a gender imbalance in terms of admissions into your programs and how you've tackled that. I mean, from where I'm coming from, I found, and I'm coming from an independent school, so it's different, and I understand that. But we find that there are a lot more parents of boys that feel that their child needs a different program, and that advocacy doesn't happen for girls as often.
Every day.
Gender imbalance.
Every single day. It's one of the things that our program review even highlighted and that we are trying to tackle as best as we can. I find that because I was presidential awardee for science. What that meant is that it opened doors for me for a lot of professional development to learn from experts in the field of what do micro messages send to our girls in our classrooms. How are we inadvertently telling our students who are disenfranchised or anything that they're not worthy of the higher level classes, that if you don't have representation in those classes, they're never going to self-select into that classroom because nobody looks like them and they don't want to go into that classroom. But we also deal with, on a daily basis, the academic bullying that occurs from boys who have been told their entire lives that they are the ones that are the most meaningful person in their household, and their younger sisters don't ever make it into our advanced topics in physics. And we have been now doing exit exams to say you've been in our honors program for 3 years at high school, and the likelihood for you to go into advanced topics or to an AP course would have been very high. But as a female, you've not gone into it. So that is one of the reasons why, in order to combat that, we've done a lot of, growth mindset, famous failures, going in and doing orientation to these are the things about gifted, and not everybody has to look the same. And guess what? There are women and people of color who were gifted, and it's not just you, dude, right? It's not an old dead white guy. I always ask the kids, can you just describe for me in your head what a famous genius looks like? And I'm like, and he has white hair, and he's probably sticking his tongue out, right? And they're like, oh my God, how did you know it was Albert Einstein? I was like, there's more than Albert Einstein. So if kids don't see themselves in those roles, and it's reinforced by the posters that are on our walls, and it's reinforced by the textbooks, it's really hard for them to fight that. And it's also culturally that's what's going to be the expectation, right? So it's reteaching within the culture and within the district of how do we fix this problem, right? The first thing is to admit that there is a problem. to bring parents in and say, look, here's statistics, we don't have any girls in this program. Why is that?
All right, so we're going to wrap on that. The only thing I'm going to say is we had a similar situation in New York City with a specialized school. More boys were testing in based on the identification system. And what they ended up doing in that situation is they added a writing component to the entrance exam, and girls came in. So it could be a little tweak like that. And it certainly is, it certainly is also educating, your constituent base. But we just added a writing piece, and we found, and now it's more of an even gender balance in terms of identification into this particular school. Comment? Okay.
Well, no, new question.
All right, so we're 3 minutes over. If you can hang for one more question, and then we'll give them a hand. So go ahead.
Identification. Just wondering how you balance objective versus subjective. And the only one that was mentioned was your Naglieri, which I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, it's the NNAT3. So it's not 2, it's 3 now. NNAT2. And the Joyce Fantastic, she was the one that helped the program 6 years ago to get up and running. She had recommended that for a population of students because our students may not have the vocabulary, and it's nonverbal.
Right.
But we're noticing is it's very spatial and a little mathematical. So if your program doesn't support that type of gifted programming, then we're running into. So nothing's perfect, as we've talked about here today, but that's one of our identifiers. We do a portfolio, we do teacher recommendation, which is also a problem too, because nobody wants to release the kids. Parent recommendation, but parents don't know about it unless somebody tells them about it. So there's a few things, but overall we at least have those things. So if a student doesn't do well in the Naglieri, then we at least look at everything. If their report card is all A's, but they scored low, something's not right, then they're not a spatial kid. So we would still let them in the program.
And I'm gonna, you can, Abby afterwards ask them. The only thing I'll say, and you had mentioned this, is that you want to align identification and service delivery. So if you're going to use IQ or grade, but then you're going to do a pull-out model that's creative and critical. If you're going to do an accelerated math, you need to look at some sort of math aptitude. If you're going to do it, so it's linking that. Most school systems use 2 to 4 measures, 1 or 2 objective, either in aptitude or achievement, and then teacher recs, parent recs. Joyce had talked about a portfolio approach, which I advocate for, but you have to have time and money and energy to do a portfolio approach. It's time intensive and it can be expensive, but usually there's a mix. Let's give them a hand. And again, I appreciate you hanging in. I hope this day has been fulfilling, and you're probably too much overload. But again, thank you for coming to Rutgers and spending your professional time and being a great participant and learner. Thank you.